Well, howdy. Welcome back to my kitchen. This is Texas Cooking Today. I'm Stuart, and today we're talking about flour. Lots of different kinds of flour, but today I'm focusing specifically on wheat flour. Wheat flour with gluten, all right? So this is a discussion about different kinds of wheat flour and the gluten content and what they're used for and how they're used. And so I've got kind of a variety of different flours laid out here to take a look at and to discuss what they're used for and to discuss how gluten comes into play and how to increase it or what you need to do if you want to decrease it. So there's a lot of information packed in this simple little video, and it's all about flour. Before we get into it though, let me ask you to please click the subscribe button. Click the bell if you'd like to be notified of when I post videos. If you want to really help me out, subscribe, click the like button, and drop some comments down below. It's always appreciated. Also, there are some links right down below here in my description box about my website where you get my recipes. Also about some of the products that I provide through my website. Well, not my website, but through Texas Cooking Today here. And so what I'd like to discuss today is, for just a moment, this little guy. It's a little cooking thermometer. This one is made by ChefsTemp. There it comes right up right there. It says 73 degrees. That's just the temperature in here. All right, this is a great display because the display rotates with you, folks. It turns whichever direction that you've got it angled. So if you've got this upside down, that's the way it's going to read. All right, and so it's a really cool thermometer for that, but it's also extremely accurate, slides down into the food, it has a nice narrow probe on it so it doesn't disturb your food much, and it gives a very accurate, very fast reading. Within 1 second, you're going to get within a degree, okay? So it's a really cool thermometer. Take a look at that. If you'd like one of those, they are in the description box. There's a link for it. It says ChefsTemp. That's the one you want to look at, and it's a really worthwhile item. Now, I'll tell you what, come over. Let's take a look at these different flours. Let's talk about what they're used for and also, hey, what that gluten does for you and what it doesn't do for you. Let's take a look. You know, there's so many different things that we make with our flour. Everything from bread to breadings, pancakes, cakes, cookies, all kinds of confections that come from this wonderful single item, flour. You know, beautiful, very soft, gentle, wonderful item, this stuff. Wheat flour, we've been using this stuff for millennia. It goes back thousands of years, and it has been a part of the human diet for thousands of years. Folks, there are some people that are sensitive to gluten. I understand that, and I'm not going to argue whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And that is because there's this argument in the food industry over whether commercial manufacturers should be allowed to stress certain things or not. Basically, they throw out buzzwords into the industry that people react to. You know, there was the whole argument over fat, and then it turned into an argument over sugar. And then it turned into an argument over MSG. And, you know, at some point it became an argument about gluten. None of these things in and of themselves are bad. They're neither good nor bad. They're just ingredients in what we eat. And then, of course, there's when they tout certain things that the food industry thinks is necessary. A good example of this is when they were talking about antioxidants. Oh, if your food didn't have an antioxidant in it, you were just going to die. People didn't even know what antioxidants were. Folks, it's something that keeps your food from oxidizing. You know, if steel oxidizes, that's called rust, right? Okay, but same thing happens on food. If you cut an apple and leave it out, it turns brown on the outside. That's oxidization. And that brown part, the nutrient value has been partially killed off there because of the oxidizing. All right, so the antioxidant would preserve the apple so that it doesn't oxidize as quickly. For instance, if I rubbed lemon on it, it's the ascorbic acid in the lemon, that vitamin C that is causing the antioxidant effect. Okay, so suddenly the apple has an antioxidant. It doesn't make it somehow holy or better, and it doesn't mean that antioxidants are necessary in everything or that they save you from anything. Because what happens the minute your food hits the acid pit that we call our stomach? It oxidizes instantly. All right, it's changed because of the acid, the corrosive effect of the acid. It has to in order to be digested. So don't get caught up in industry arguments or in industry buzzwords to sell products. Right now, it's gluten, okay? Gluten isn't a bad thing, but it's something you need to understand. So what is it? What is gluten? Gluten's protein. Gluten is the protein in flour. So if you go onto a website and you see on that website that a certain flour has 8.6% protein, then that means 8.6% of that bag of flour is gluten. All right? Plain and simple. Don't confuse this for other flours, okay? Because there are some flours made from some plants that have protein in them that is not gluten. All right, so we're talking about wheat flour right now. And in wheat flour, when you talk about protein, you're talking about gluten. It's the same thing. Protein content, percentage-wise, is your gluten content percentage-wise. And it's hard to tell from the nutrition labels because they will talk about the percentage of the amount used in your diet rather than in the total bag. All right, so they're not talking about a percentage of protein relative to what is there. You have to go to the websites to find that. Also, there are some informative sites online where you can find this information. I have flours here that go from 4% gluten to 14.5% gluten. Now, so you'll know, there's a lot of different kinds of flours out there. There's flours that we call cake flours. There are flours we call all-purpose flours. There are flours we call bread flours. There are flours that we call high gluten flours, which are even more glutinous than a bread flour, which is already high gluten. And then there's also whole wheat flour, and usually it's a very high gluten flour, usually, not always. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So let's talk about just percentages. We're going to start down here, cake flour. If you want a light, fluffy cake, you use a flour that's low in protein, okay? So you're looking at below 8% if you can find it. Now there is one company that puts out a flour, and this right back here, it's Peter Pan flour. I forget the name of the company that puts it out, but they are a flour that is 6% gluten. Now that's one of the lowest gluten contents in the industry. I don't know why they call it all-purpose flour when it really ought to be labeled cake flour. Now this cake flour is a little bit lower in gluten, and they claim that they mill it more and sieve it more to make it finer so that your cakes are even that much lighter and fluffier and finer. So if you wanted to spend that little extra bit more, you do get lower gluten with a specialty cake flour like this. But remember, they're high priced. I'm buying 2 pounds of this for the price of 5 pounds of one of these, all right? And then there's the cost of these, which are an even greater value, these 25-pound bags. And I would mention right here now, if you're buying 3 or more bags of flour per year, do yourself a favor and just go ahead and get a 20 or 25-pound bag. Because once you've purchased 2 of those 5-pound bags, you've already paid for one of these. All right? So it makes only good sense just to get the larger bag and find some storage space for it. Now you don't have to go crazy like I did and go and buy a 50-pound bag of flour, but I've been doing a lot of baking lately and I needed this for a certain project, and that is these right here. I'm going to get these a little more round, a little more shapely, and a little more perfect. This is not what I'm looking for in my quality. But I wanted this out here just to discuss, hey, flour makes wonderful stuff. Now, as a general rule, your cake flours are going to be 6% and down. Like I said, if you can find below 8%, you're generally in a cake flour, and it's a good choice. Most of your all-purpose flours are going to run between 8 to 10% protein. And that's what I have here. This is an all-purpose flour, and this one is 8.8 to 9.4% on their protein. So that's the total gluten. Now here I have some bread flour. This is King Arthur. And by the way, none of these companies sponsored me, all right? And I have no sponsorship from anybody, including ChefsTemp. All I get from ChefsTemp is just a commission if you use the link in the description box to purchase that thermometer. So none of these companies sponsor me. Do need to mention that. King Arthur bread flour. This is one of the industry standards for good bread flours, and theirs is 12.7% gluten. Now, it's not necessarily all-encompassing. There's a lot of different kinds of breads. There are some breads that are very light and fluffy and soft, and all of the pores on the inside are small and very even. You know, like white bread you get from the grocery store. All right, this would make good white bread. Does it make such a good crusty French loaf? It does to a degree. I've pulled a few good loaves out of this. However, I'm looking for a little different quality, so I'm going to an even higher gluten content. And I'm moving to this, which is the So Strong Special. That is a special high gluten flour that is made for making really crusty, chewy, stretchy kinds of breads. Very interesting artisan breads. And so I'm going to be playing around with that a whole lot. I'm trying to improve my bread making skills. So anyway, bread flour, 12, and bread flours normally are going to be in the neighborhood of 12 to 14% gluten, all right? Generally on the lower end of that. Most of them that I find are in the 12% bracket, 12 to 13. And King Arthur is considered one of the better of those. All right, now so you'll see some that are marketed as bread flour that might be 10 to 12%. And it's just different companies market different ways. This one says all-purpose, and so does this. But there's a big difference in the amount of gluten between the two of them. Okay, and here I have one marketed as bread flour, and it is a higher gluten content than something that is normally higher than it. This is some whole wheat flour, and this one is 10.6%. Now that's unusual because most whole wheat flours are 12 to 14%, and sometimes more on their gluten content. And that's because they're whole wheat. It's got all of it in there. It just also depends on the kind of wheat. All right, certain types of wheat produce higher gluten than other types of wheat. For instance, semolina is higher gluten than durum. All right. But durum wheat makes a better flour for making bread. Okay, so we learn a lot about different wheats when you start studying flours. A whole wheat flour, like I said, most of the time it's generally very high in gluten. This particular brand, which was gold medal, when I researched it, turns out it was 10.6% gluten, and that was one of the lowest I found for whole wheat flour. Okay. So if having a lower gluten content in your whole wheat matters to you, I guess that would be a good choice. For me, it's neither here nor there. I would have preferred it to be higher. I wanted the King Arthur, but they were out of it. If I had gotten the King Arthur, it would have been about 14% on the gluten. So, big difference. And then back here, as I mentioned before, I've got this, which is a special flour. It's a high gluten flour. Great for pizza crusts, pasta, or really super crusty breads. If I wanted to make a real good, let's say, a good quality sourdough, and I wanted it to have a lot of structure and strength to it, this would be the one to go with. And there are a lot of different kinds of sourdoughs, the same way there's just a lot of different kinds of white breads. Everything from French to a simple loaf of white bread at the market. And different qualities in the textures, both of the crust as well as the texture inside the bread. And that comes from hydration levels and from gluten levels, folks. So gluten really does affect what we make. Now, I'm going to recommend, what would I recommend? Well, I recommend you keep some all-purpose flour around the house, because you know when you're going to be doing battering or making pancakes or waffles or whatever, there's nothing better than all-purpose flour. However, if you're going to be baking a lot of cakes and stuff, you might not be as satisfied with the quality of the texture of those cakes. They may be firmer than you want them to be, and that'll be because of the gluten. So you might want to switch to something that's a lower gluten. That Peter Pan flour, like I said, that's one of the lowest gluten contents I've seen in the industry for an all-purpose flour. 6%. That's incredible. And the Swan's down 4%. Most of your all-purposes are going to be between 8 and 10%. Most of. Remember, different companies market different ways. There is no federal guidelines that says that an all-purpose flour has to be this to that percentage on gluten. There are no laws that control that at all. So it's kind of up to each of the manufacturers as to how they market it. And they are all over the place. So if you really want to know, you have to study. All right. So you'll know I did purchase some of these through a restaurant supply that I use online. It's a web-based restaurant supply, so look it up in that way, web restaurant supply, and you'll find it right off. That's where I bought this one back here. Got that one from Sam's, got that one from Sam's, and the rest of this just came out of the supermarket. Again, I'm going to mention, if you're buying 3 or more of the 5-pound bags per year, well, you know, like this stuff right here, this whole wheat, that was $7. You know, by the time I've bought 3 of these, I've more than paid for this. All right. These bigger bags don't cost that much. You're usually around $8 to $10. This one back here, being a specialty flour, it ran me $30. Okay, but you compare that to the price per pound at 5 pounds bags, and the cost of flour is just enormous. So ordering it, having it shipped to you, or going someplace where you can get the bigger ones is worth your trouble, worth your time. Don't be afraid of gluten. Gluten is protein, and it is not as terrible as a lot of people have made it out to be. Do a little research on that and make sure that you speak with a dietitian if you're really concerned about it. And you might find out some truths. As I was researching and did research through Johns Hopkins and through a couple of other schools that have medical, that do this kind of research, medical research, I found out a lot about the proteins in flours, this gluten. And what I found out was that it's really just another one of those overplayed things by the industry. Now, some people are very sensitive. They have celiac disease, and if they get a hold of gluten, then it's going to mess them up. But most people that claim to have problems are the same people that claim that antioxidants just made them so much healthier, and they claimed that getting rid of MSG kept them alive or whatever, and they'll have all kinds of claims. So I feel sorry for those folks. Please do your research so you don't have to fall into that trap. And please shop around your flours. You're going to find out there's a lot of choices. And of course, you might have some idea that I'll be doing some baking this fall season. So yeah, we're going to be breaking out the flour and making some good stuff. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. This is Texas Cooking Today. I'm Stuart, and if you would, please, again, click the subscribe button and the bell next to it so you get notified when I put up new videos. If you would, check out what I have in my description box. That's where you'll find my website. At my website, I have my services as a photographer and products that I sell, as well as the recipes that I sell for Texas Cooking Today right here. And they're not normal. You've got to look at those things. There's a free one there if you want to try it out. It's the cinnamon roll recipe, so get that sucker. It's not going to cost you anything. Just go, it'll run it through the payment processor, but when it comes to payment, it'll just be free and you can download it, okay? So that's all there is to it, ladies and gentlemen. Please try that out. And thank you for watching. Have a good day.